Hey, welcome everybody. It's Ted Prodromo. It's Tuesdays with Ted, and I'm here with Bernie Borges. Welcome, Bernie.
Hey, Ted, thanks for having me.
We met a couple of years ago. You were at Vengresso, and I've been kind of following you from afar. It's been great to watch you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I had 4 great years at Vengresso and then I accepted an opportunity outside the company and running content marketing for a large business process outsourcing company and having a blast.
Cool. I like what your topic is. Talk about midlife fulfillment is attainable. And gosh, my first 20 years of my career were like a rocket straight up. The last 20 years have been a roller coaster up and down. So tell me about this midlife is attainable.
So, Ted, where I have to begin is around the word midlife and what is meant by the word midlife, because what I've discovered is that first and foremost, people have this sort of perception of what midlife is. And most people perceive it to be really driven by age only. And in many cases, people think of it being over the age of 45 or even 50. And the reality is that midlife is more a function of two things, partly by age, yes, but only age because we experience more things as we start to get a little bit older. But that threshold actually can go all the way down to, believe it or not, your early 30s.
Hmm.
And let me unpack that a little bit for you. So when I was doing some research on this, I came across a study that's called the happiness U curve. Have you heard of that?
No.
Okay. So the happiness U curve, published by the National Bureau of Economics. And by the way, U is the letter U. So think of the letter U being like this, right?
Right.
Well, the top left of the U curve, according to this research, was somewhere around age 18. And then we start becoming less happy after age 18, and we bottom out in our mid 40s. So after age 18, we start to become less happy and we bottom out in our mid 40s. And then we start climbing back up the happiness U curve past the mid 40s. Now, there's a lot that goes into that. And, we're only together here for a few minutes.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is that midlife is not a function of just age, it's a function of circumstances in your life that not usually, can happen as early as in your 30s.
Wow.
Okay. So that's the first thing is that, midlife fulfillment is attainable because here's the other key point, like part B to this, Ted, is that we go through multiple midlife seasons. You said yourself, right? Roller coaster ride, up and down, right? Hey,
Yeah.
that's normal. You just basically described almost everybody's life,
Yeah.
right? So we
Exactly.
go through multiple midlife seasons, and I give a few examples. So I recently published a podcast, as you know, called Midlife Fulfilled, right?
Hmm.
So it's available at midlifefulfilled.com as well as anywhere podcast you can get your podcast, Midlife Fulfilled. And so the first episode I devoted to this topic, like what is midlife, right? How do you define midlife? I talk about the happiness U curve, right? And I give a few examples of people that might be going through different midlife seasons. So, for example, let's take a professional athlete. And by the way, there's lots and lots and lots of professional athletes out there that are not big household names. I
Yeah.
mean, lots of them, right? A lot of them kind of hit their peak and then they're done late 20s, early 30s. And then they have to go get a real job, or maybe they start a business, right?
Mhm.
But now they're in a new season. They probably were doing whatever their athletic endeavor was since they were 5 years old.
Right.
And they turned pro at whatever age they turned pro. And just use the age 30. And let's say at age 30, they're retired from their professional athletic career,
Hmm.
right? Now they're in a new season. And for a lot of people, Ted, that's a huge and challenging thing for them because they were playing a sport since age 5 and earning a living at it the last 10 or 12 years.
Yep.
And now they're in this brand new season. That's a midlife season, even though in that example, they're only 30 years old,
Yeah.
right? They may have another 10 years of something really great going on in their life, and they may hit another season in their midlife, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they got married and then they go through a divorce, right? Or they got married and then kids come into the scene, and now it's a different season of midlife.
Hmm.
So the point I'm getting at is, and I know I'm babbling here on this, but I'm
That's
so
okay.
passionate about it, Ted, is that midlife is not just age 45 or more. It's not just an age thing. It's about circumstances. And in many cases, it can really, you can hit that first midlife season as early as in your early 30s.
Yeah. I can see that with my kids. They're about 10 years into their careers now, and they're kind of going down like, oh my God, this is the grind. Like, oh, I got 30 more years of this, but it won't, because my tech career, everything is so different 20 years ago. Look at technology compared to today.
Right.
There's been so many seasons through that career. And then I'm in marketing now. So there's now all these changes in marketing. I love the way you explain this.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the other thing that my research led me to, and I devoted episode 3 to this topic, and that is the 80/20 principle. So the reason that I researched the 80/20 principle, even though we all know about it, like, who doesn't know about the 80/20 principle, even just conceptually, right?
Right.
But the reason that I researched it, Ted, is because I did my own survey and I got 265 or so people that responded to my survey. And it was 7 questions. And one question was just kind of like the anchor question was, um, are you partially fulfilled, like less than totally fulfilled, or are you totally fulfilled, or are you not fulfilled at all? Right. And 79% said that they're less than totally fulfilled.
Hmm.
19% said that they were totally fulfilled, which is very impressive. And the remaining 2 or 3% said they were totally unfulfilled. Right. So
Hmm.
79% less than totally fulfilled, 19% totally fulfilled. Okay. What does that look like to you? 80/20, right?
Yeah.
So I researched 80/20, and what I discovered was that that principle is prevalent in so many aspects of economy, sociology, and our everyday life.
Yeah.
And the net of that is that for 80% of people, even though it was 79% of my survey, let's round
Right.
that up to 80, right? For those 80% who said they're less than totally fulfilled, you know what? That's normal.
Yeah.
And it's okay. Like, I heard from people after I published episode 3 saying, thank you. You, like, I've been guilty that I've been, less than totally fulfilled. I've
Hmm.
been feeling guilty. Like, why should I feel this way? Right. When in reality, it's okay. It's normal. You're in
Yeah.
that 80% camp that's less than totally fulfilled. And there's nothing wrong with that. And by the way, Ted, and I'm sorry to just keep babbling on this, but
No, I love it.
um, there is a distinction between fulfillment and happiness.
Hmm.
Okay. Back to the happiness U curve.
Yeah.
Even in my podcast, I said I'm not a fan of the word happiness. And here's why. It's not because I don't want to be happy, or I don't want, or I don't want you to be happy. It's not about that at all. Is that you can be fulfilled in some areas of your life, but yet not be happy in some areas of your life, right?
Hmm.
So you can be happily married, have a wonderful family, and you're a happy family person, but what if you hate your job? You're
Yeah.
unfulfilled in your job. Or you can have the opposite. You can be totally fulfilled and crushing it in your career, but maybe you have relationships in your life that are just broken and you're miserable in those relationships, right? So there's this dichotomy, this kind of like bifurcation of, you can experience fulfillment in some areas of your life, but yet other areas be less than fulfilled, which does impact, your happiness in those areas of your life.
Yeah.
So the bottom line, Ted, is that, we have many dimensions to our life, right? And so just recognizing that it's unrealistic that we expect to be 100% fulfilled. And again, I devoted episode 3 of the Midlife Fulfilled podcast to just that topic alone of the 80/20 principle,
Yeah.
and how it impacts what it means to us in our own midlife seasons and journeys.
I'm kind of thinking slice of life as you're saying all this, because we're in different slices of our life, and it's never going to be all the same. You just don't go, you're happy 100% of the time or
Yeah.
fulfilled. I've
Yeah.
seen that a
Yeah.
lot too, talking to people coming out of the pandemic. They've been home working alone for 2 years. It's like, I want to go to the office and hang out with people and go to the bar and have drinks after work. So they're doing well in their career, but they're working more hours than ever because they're always at home on the front of their computer.
Yep.
So I see that. I love the way you've put that perspective, fulfillment and happiness.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So how did
So,
you start on this path yourself about this fulfillment and happiness?
yeah. Yeah, I'm so glad you asked. So I've been podcasting since 2013, so about 9 years now, and this is my third podcast. The first was sort of an experiment, 49 episodes in. The second was with my business, and then when I merged to co-found Vengresso with my former partners at Vengresso, I'm still a co-founder there, but no longer active in the business. I merged my podcast into that business. And that podcast, we retired at episode 300
Wow.
about a year ago. It was, I think it was April last year. And I really enjoyed it. I interviewed, it was called the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. It's still out there, just not new ones. We retired at episode 300. But I love
Hmm.
to podcast and I love conducting interviews and I just love the sort of the storytelling and the relationship building that you get to do when you're interviewing someone on a podcast.
Yeah.
So when I joined iCore, well, I got to host their podcast. So I'm hosting another podcast. And while it's great and it's fulfilling from a career standpoint, it's not my podcast. It's not on a topic that, that feeds me
Yeah.
creatively. And that's really why I'm doing this. Is this whole midlife thing. Like I've been in midlife seasons for decades now. Okay.
Hmm.
I'm in my early 60s, and I've gone through midlife seasons starting in my own 30s, right?
Yep.
And so it's a topic that's been on my mind. So I decided, Ted, that I would just start doing a little bit of research on it. And when I came across the happiness U curve and just other material, it validated what I had sort of intuitively suspected, which is it's not about being over the age of 45 or 50.
Yeah.
It's about being, in a circumstance that gives you pause, reason to pause and reevaluate and figure something out, you know, and it's
Yeah.
not defined only by an age. So I just decided that, since I'm happily married, 34 years. My wife and I are empty nesters. Um, we're empty nesters, and our kids live out of state. And so, I've got a little bit of time. I've got evenings and weekends, right?
There you go.
Where I can devote this creative energy that I have around this topic of midlife. So I launched the Midlife Fulfilled podcast. The reaction I've been getting has just been really outstanding. I've started to do BF to AF interviews. Do you know what a BF to AF interview is?
No. Tell me,
So
please.
BF stands for before fulfillment, and AF stands for after fulfillment. So I'm featuring people on the podcast, anyone, any walk of life, right? Anywhere, who has a BF to AF story, meaning they've got a story that speaks to BF to AF. And I'll give you an example of episode 4 that at the time that you and I are recording this in March, what's today's date? March 8th, that we're the date we're recording this.
Yeah.
The episode 4 is what just published, and it's with a woman named Karen Freeland. And her BF to AF story, I'm only going to give you a little bit of it because I'd love for anybody who's watching us to go actually listen to it. But she
Yeah.
was in corporate and she was kind of stuck. She was unhappy. And, someone asked her, one of her coworkers asked her, like, so what, what would you regret not doing before you die? Right. That would, give you fulfillment, because she knew
Right.
she wanted more than what she was doing in her corporate job. And she said, what I really want to do is I want to finish my memoir that I had started. This is her speaking, that I'd started a few years ago.
Hmm.
So she decided to do that. And all of a sudden, she got a purpose. She had a reason to live. And I mean, not that she didn't have a reason to live. She's happily married with 2 beautiful, healthy sons. But I mean, she just got energized, you
Yeah.
know? As she said, she had a reason to live more, reason to live more than creating PowerPoints, right? in
I
her
love
in
it.
her corporate job. So she finished her memoir and she published her memoir, and it's a book. And the name of her book, are you ready for this?
Mhm.
The name of her book is The Ins and Outs of My Vagina, a Penetrating Memoir. And as provocative as the title sounds, it is about her journey when she was pregnant and how she had no idea like how to manage her quote unquote body part to give
Wow.
birth, right? And she wrote the story as a woman for other women so that they could sort of relate to her and she could impart, some empathy on them.
Interesting.
And it's been life-changing for her, you know?
Yeah.
She's no longer in that job. She's a full-time life coach now and an author and a speaker, and she's all about helping other women. Funny thing is, she says that she's had men read her book because she said the men have said, "Hey, now I've got some insights that I didn't have before about, what women go through," right?
Right.
And so, I mean, it's just an example of her BF was she was stuck in a corporate job, even though she was happy in her family life, she was stuck in a corporate job that she had no fulfillment in. And then
Yeah.
her after fulfillment was finishing this book, publishing it, and then and kind of unveiling to the world this new chapter in her life, you know?
Yeah.
And she's totally fulfilled and loving every minute of it. And that's
Uh,
an example of, a BF to AF story. And that's what I'm doing now, Ted, is I'm featuring people and each story is going to be unique. I mean, maybe I don't know about if they'll all be as unique as that one, because that's a pretty, interesting one.
right.
But nonetheless, they'll all be unique, right? Who knows, Ted? Maybe after this, you'll say, "Hey, Bernie, I've got a BF to AF story I want to share on your podcast."
Yeah. No, I love the story approach because some podcasts are just boring. But when you tell stories and they're all unique stories, my wife just retired 45 years or 40 years as a nurse practitioner in OBGYN. Well, she might want to read that book. But we kind of have a new chapter where she's retired and we just had our first grandson. So we're like in heaven.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. That's
yeah. We've got a
amazing.
grandson as well. It's awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he doesn't live near us. He's out of state, and that part's hard. But it's awesome to have a grandson.
Yeah. He's 15 minutes away. So we're like watching him
Wow.
evolve is awesome.
Yeah,
So cool.
that's great.
So
That's
thank
great.
you, Bernie. This has been great. I can't wait to learn more about this. I'm going to definitely subscribe to your podcast.
Thank you. Any surprises on anything that I just shared with you?
I just love the way you broke it down. And it's making me look at, oh, yeah, my career, my life. You can slices of life in different formats, but happiness and fulfillment. Yeah, it's really got me thinking here.
Exactly. Sue's saying, "Hey, yeah, gay for grandchildren." I'm right there with you, Sue. Oh, Susie. Sorry, Susie.
Yep.
The
Susie's got
print
a
is
few. Yeah.
small for my eyes.
Yeah. No, this is great. So your podcast again is
Midlife Fulfilled, and you can get it anywhere you get your podcasts.
great. Oh, Susie's a facilitator for Science of Happiness. That's what she's saying too. Great.
Awesome. Awesome.
Well, great. Thank you, Bernie. And we will be in touch shortly.
All
And I'll
right.
be
Thanks for
listening
having
to
me,
your
Ted. I
podcast.
enjoyed the conversation.
We'll talk soon.
You bet.